Hey, if you love God and you're excited to be in his house this Sunday, will you put your hands together and make some noise one more time for Jesus? Yeah. Welcome. We have a four-part series that we've been in on dating and marriage and relationships that we're calling First Comes Love, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. As always, I like to look right in the camera. Welcome everybody joining us on the other sides of computers and phones and tablets, wherever you're watching this. We're so glad that you are along for the ride. Five Stones time, and just welcome your church family. Yeah. So glad that you're here. Well, we're calling this series that we're in First Comes Love, and it's based on that elementary school song that we used to sing to each other to kind of tease each other. First comes love, then we'd say, then comes marriage, and then we'd say, then comes baby and a baby. Somebody, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about families, and we're going to talk about parenting. And I've been doing this long enough that I can see immediately over some of your faces, you're like, okay, well, this is the one I can check out on. Because my kids, I don't have kids, or maybe my kids have moved on. And I want to tell you, please do not check out on this, because I think this is that involves everybody. It involves all of us. You know why? You ever heard that proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child? I think that's true. And I think it's challenging, it's difficult to raise children in this day and age. And in fact, there's so many of us that are represented here that have children, that are raising children, that are connected to children in some way. Affects everybody. I'll show it to you. Raise your hand if you're raising children right now, raising children in any way. Yeah, lots of hands up. Now raise your hand if you'd like to raise children one day. Yeah. Now raise your hand if you'd like to give your children to the ones that just said that. They're, yeah. No, don't do that. Right. This affects us all. Right. Like every single are connected in some way. You might be an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a teacher, a neighbor. We're all impacting this generation. Every single one of us have something to do, and there's so many different dynamics with this. Like just right here in this room, we have got traditional families, we've got step families, we have got foster families, we got families that have adopted kids, we got families that are believing, couples that are believing for kids, and we've got, in some cases, grandparents that have stepped up and they're raising their kids. They've already raised their kids, now they're raising their grandparents. And no matter where it is that you find yourself along in this journey, I want to let you know that we're behind you and we're with you. And I recognize it can be so challenging to raise a family in 2025. It can be difficult, it can be challenging because there's so much that works against you. And I remember way back when Deborah and I were deciding whether or not we were going to have kids. We'd been married for a few years, and we were thinking about, okay, I want to have kids, but we want to have kids that love the Lord more than we do. We want to figure out how that we would do that. And so we were thinking about how that all was going to go about. And we thought, man, once we have kids, man, we know exactly what we're going to do. We thought we had all the answers. Come on, somebody. Because when you don't have kids, you know all. And then you have kids and you know nothing. You realize it's like, I don't know. Like when you don't have kids and you see that kid throwing a temper tantrum in the middle of the grocery store, you're like, get it together, mom and dad. And then when you have kids, you want to be the one that throws the temper tantrum in the middle of the store. It can just be, you think that you have all the answers, but the reality is you really don't know much. And so raising kids, we need all the help that we can get. When Deborah, I remember right after she gave birth to our first son, TJ, it was a while ago, but right after that happened, and everything was taken care of, then you go on like this little parade thing, in the hospital. They put Deborah in a wheelchair, gave her the baby, and they drove her in this little wheelchair as we made their way out. And I'm waving from behind, like, yeah, guess what? I had a part to play in that. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to be Father of the Year. Like you're wheeling around. And then when we got down, we got all the way out. And the one thing that they wanted to make sure that we knew how was to make sure that we knew how to buckle the kid into the car seat before we could leave the hospital. So I had to pull the car up and I had to show them that we know how to, I don't know if they do this to this day, but like the nurse sat there and made sure I knew how to like buckle them in, and his little floppy head wouldn't, you had to put stuff on either side. And then once we could show them that we did that, the nurse looked at me, she said, thing, and she said, well, congratulations. And then she said, bye. And I remember, it all came crashing in on me at that moment, because, we'd been cared for in the hospital this whole time, and now suddenly she was saying bye. I was like, bye? Wait a minute, bye? I don't even know. We don't know what we're doing. You're just going to let us drive off? You're giving us this child? It was amazing, right? And it was at this moment that I realized, oh my gosh, we don't know what we're doing at all. And we did like maybe many of you do or have done, which is like we started looking into resources. Man, are there books that could teach us how to do this? And we started looking for different people that were in the church and that were raising their families, appeared to be raising them well. And so we're like, hey, how are you doing this? And so when we talked to these different families that were in the church, some people would be like, oh, well, we got 3 kids and they love Jesus, but our 4th one is like, it doesn't want to have anything to do with them. And we're like, how did that happen? And like, well, we don't really know. And families that seemed like it was perfect families, the doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, and we're like, hey, what did you do? And they're like, bless God, we don't really know either. And so it was a little frustrating to us because it was like, man, surely there's got to be a better way. There's got to be somebody that knows how to raise their kids. Like, what is the direction that we follow in this? In a lot of ways, raising a family, raising kids is a lot like baking cookies. You know what I'm talking about? Like every family has got their own little recipe, and some families have a little bit more sugar than others, Others have a little bit more nuts, just being real, right? And but everybody's got their own little ingredients, and it's like they pass them down. And then every single one of them, what they do is they put their little cookies on the cookie sheet and put them in the oven, and they close it up. And they wait, and that's what we call the teenage years, and they just kind of cross your fingers and hope that it's going to come out well. And then around age 21, we open it back up and we say, okay, how did they turn out? And then like, well, these 2 are good, but that one kind of burned around the edges, Or you got the one family that's like, I don't know, all 5 of ours burned up. Like, oh, what did you do? I don't know. Like, we tried to do everything in our power. Like, everybody's got this little thing. And then every so often you meet that one family that pulls out the cookie sheet, and they got, like, they're all perfect, perfect smiles, perfect jobs, perfect hair. Like, they're just perfect, And you're like, man, what did you guys do? And those were the families that I would come up to, and I'd say, like, what did you do to make this all thing worked out? And invariably, they would respond to me, and they would say, we don't know. We just, we can't take the credit. To God be the glory. Bless God. And I would always think, well, that's good, but there's nothing I can follow there. And the Bible says that it's not just handing him over to the Lord like we did this morning. That's a component of it. I think it's vital. It's necessary. If you want to raise godly kids that love the Lord more than you, I think that's an imperative part. But the Bible also says faith without works is dead. You got to do something to this. And who knows, like, everybody knows the coach has something to do with it, right? Like we would all say that when it comes to sports, like the coach has got a playbook that he's trying to follow something. And we know that if you're a coach that you might not be able to play the game for those players, but if you can get them out on the field and if you could make them and put their heart on it, then when it comes time for the difficult play, when it comes time for it, they're going to be prepared. They're going to be ready to do it. And everybody recognizes that a coach at least has some bearings on how the players are going to play, right? I just think about Nick Sirianni, who is just won the Super Bowl. And about 5 years ago, what they did is they signed a contract. The Eagles signed a contract with this coach for about $30 or $35 million. So what this company or this organization was saying is that the coach has some bearings to play on this. Like they have something to do with the outcome. And I think that we, as parents, we can do something to impact our children, the youth of tomorrow, the people that we care about so much that we're gonna hand this over. The move of God we're handing over to that generation. Surely there's got to be something that we can do to kind of stack the deck. Everybody has got free will, and you cannot force anybody to receive Jesus, but I think that there are some things that we can do as parents, as grandparents, as neighbors, as friends, as aunts, as uncles, as people who have children in our lives, that we can do something to stack the deck. And I really do think that our children, like whether you have kids of your own or your kids have moved out of your house, the children in this church, in this community, they watch you. And kids are amazing mimics. They're incredible. That's why I always say with kids, you don't get what you want, you get who you are. That's the truth. It's like they're incredible mimics. They're watching and they're going to reproduce, which I think is partly to blame on why we have the society that we have right now. They've been watching generations before them, and they're just putting that into play. Whatever you do, they're going to learn, and they're going to do too, just like we learned from our parents. That's the way this works. When my son was about 8 years old, he was riding around in this little go-kart. His aunt and uncle bought him a go-kart. Man, he just would tear off drive it all around and everything. And I remember he had had the go-kart for approximately a month. And he'd been driving that thing a whole lot, driving around the house, driving in circles. And I went out to check the mail one day, and he zipped up right alongside me, and he said, Dad, I think I'm ready to drive the big car. I was like, he's like, you're 8 years old. You're ready, huh? You've been driving a month. Your feet can't reach the pedals, but you're ready to drive a real car. And he said, yep, I'm ready. He said, this is what I'm going to do. And he stuck his little head out of his go-kart, and he said, hey, pick a lane, ding-dong. And I said, he got that from his mother, is what he's been watching her. He got it from somewhere. He was watching it. Probably wasn't Deborah. Just be honest. Like, here's what we're doing. You're laying a foundation for generations to come. Whether you know it or not, the things that you do, if kids are around you and they're watching you, then they're going to be mimicking what you do. And what happens into the generation that's to come is we recognize that. There's some input that we can give so that we can see a victory. And so today what I want to do is just share you my cookie recipe. And I'm not saying it's perfect. Far from it. I'm not saying like we got it all right and everything like that. But after a lot of prayer, a lot of research, a lot of talking to a lot of people, our cookie recipe. And I believe it'll help you. And so I believe that if you use these things, I'm just going to give you 3 things today. 3 ingredients to bake some cookies. Come on. And what's going to happen is if you instill these in your family, I believe that you can expect the victory in your family as well. And so if you're a note taker, I want you to take out your notes and you can follow along. It doesn't matter to me if you're single or you're married, if you have kids or your kids have moved out. This is something we can all learn from today. And here's the first thing that I want you to write down is that you need to create a vision for your family. You need to have a vision for your family. I think this is one of the most crucial steps that anybody can possibly take. You've got to create a vision for your family to follow. Maybe it's just you and your spouse, or maybe you're not married one day. Do you have a vision for where you see your family going? See, this is why it's so important, because a vision is something that was given to you by God for something that doesn't exist yet. Your family has got to have something. Like, this is not new. Any successful organization knows that. Company, any leadership talk, anybody would know that if I want to be successful, I've got to have a mission. I've got to have some vision. I've got to have some values that I'm going to follow if I'm going to be successful. And that's because, and this is not a new passage of scripture around here, we've been talking about this for a while. Proverbs 29:18 that says this, where there is the people perish. See, a vision is an ability from God to see something that doesn't exist yet. And no matter who you are, this is especially true for families though, no matter who you are, you have got to see something that you want to shoot for. You would never leave your house without any understanding of where you're going, right? You always leave where I want to go, and this is how I'm going to get there. And here's my question. Do you have a vision for your family? Is there something that you as a couple, you as a family are shooting for? Because if you're not, according to that passage of scripture, you're perishing. I spoke with a dad just last Sunday. We were out in the lobby, and I hadn't seen him in weeks and weeks at the church. And he was just catching about like where his family is and what's going on. And his kids were in that season of life where they're moving out of the teenage world and they're moving out of the house. And as I was just touching base, like, where are they? What's going on in their life? And my heart broke for him, because what he was saying was like, I would describe those kids were rudderless. Like they have no real direction. They were leaving, they were in the process of leaving his house, and they don't know where they're going. And basically his plan was, well, man, we're hoping for the best. And you can do that. You can absolutely just, hope for the best. But I think whether you're single or married, if you don't have a clear vision of what you stand for, you could fall for anything. In that passage, you're perishing without a vision. Like, where are you going? What are you doing? Spiritually, where do you see yourself headed? Spiritually, where do you see your family going? What are you doing to take that next step? Or are you just kind of blindly crossing your fingers and hoping that tomorrow works out pretty good? You could do that. That's a tactic. But I'll tell you where that leads, to the other side of the desk, where I have sat, where husbands and wives have looked me point blank in the face and say, Pastor, I don't think we can do this anymore. I don't think I can do it. And they're giving up on a marriage. And they've been married for years and years. These are the same people that stood before God and a pastor one day, and they promises to be with that person forever, for in sickness and in health and good times and bad, until death do us part. They made those sacred promises, and then something has happened in the world that has caused them, or maybe in their relationship, or the fact that they really didn't have a vision or plan on where they were going, and now they're saying, I just don't know if I could do this. And my heart would just break for them, because I know in some cases, these are people that put in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars on one day. I mean, they plan the dress, they plan the cake, they plan the venue, what the flowers are going to look like. I'm going to wear this, you're going to wear that. This is what, I mean, they put effort and time and energy and a wedding day. But they didn't have any real clear picture on what tomorrow was going to look like and what the future was going to look like. And so they find themselves in this place where they're like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Maybe you're, as a parent, maybe you're raising kids right now, and there are many of you that raised your hand, and you're in this season. What's your vision for those kids? Because you probably had one at least at some point. Like at some point, like maybe it was you were in that hospital room, and you held that little boy or that little girl for the first time, and you looked down in their eyes, and I guarantee you in that moment, most of you had some vision. It might have been cloudy, but it would have been like something like, man, I'm going to tuck them in at night. I'm going to be there to be with them in the homework. See, but the problem is, over time, if you don't feed into that vision, or if you don't feed into the vision for your life, like where am I going, then that vision gets cloudier and cloudier. And what ends up happening is you become blind to it. And we are currently living in a culture that is perishing. It is lost. I believe the reason why this is happening is because we've lost God's redemptive plan for marriage, for families. And because of that fact, we're saying, like, man, I don't know. We don't really know where we're going anymore. And I'm telling you, if we want to succeed, and I'm talking about as a culture, then we've got to fight for the next generation. I'm telling you, I believe that. Come on, if you're going to give God praise, give him praise. That means that if you're a parent, or if you're an aunt or an uncle, or if you're a teacher or a neighbor, or if there's somebody in your life, here's the thing. You've got to recognize that's not just on them. It's like we prayed a moment ago. We are the ones that are helping. The next generation is begging us for us to fight for them. Because every generation is faced with this question, what are you going to do with God? Like, what are you guys doing with God? Is he real for you? Are you doing something with him? Or is this some nice thing that we do on Sundays? Generation gets faced with that question. And here's what happened. In the Old Testament, there was a guy by the name of Joshua, and he was taking over essentially a family of Israelites. There was a group of families that were marching out. Moses had been leading them for a long time. Now Joshua was taking it over. And Joshua looked around and saw what was going on around him. And here families that were facing him. He said, but if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you'll serve. Whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you're living in. But as for me, watch this. He said, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. We've made a decision. He was living in a culture that had completely abandoned God. They were worshiping everything but God. They were worshiping all kinds of stuff. Does that sound vaguely familiar? I mean, like, you look around, people worship all kinds of stuff. You could be worshiping your career. Man, what do I put my time and my effort, my energy, and my resources in? You could worship travel ball. Sorry if I step on toes. There's some things that you could worship sports. And how do you know if you're worshiping? You're saying, hey, you know what? This thing is more important. Well, you could miss church. You could miss some stuff. But we're not going to miss this because we've put a lot of money into that practice. We've put a lot of money into that equipment. We've put a lot of time into this career that I'm following. See, the problem is there's all kinds of stuff that you could live for. And our culture is living for all kinds of stuff. Joshua lived in that kind of culture. Instead of following blindly along, he said, hey, you make that choice. You could decide to worship whatever you want. But as for me, and for the people, the guy that has to answer for these little people that are following, decision that I'm going to make God the priority. See, he drew a line in the sand. And he said, hey, for me, you could do whatever you want, but for me and for my family, this is what we're going to do. So you have to have a vision for that kind of thing in your life. You've got to make a decision that this is what we stand for. See, a vision will root you in to where you're supposed to go in the difficult times, in the tough times. And let me just tell you, every family is going to go through some tough times. I know this because it doesn't matter how good, how godly you are. Those families, the enemy and the world is doing everything that he possibly can, everything that it can to get you knocked off course. And you've got to have something that says, man, this is what we're my marriage, in my family, this is what we're going to do. I have to have a vision that recaptures the hearts and the imaginations of the people in my family. And this is why vision is so important. You got to say, this is what we stand for. These are the things that in this family, I don't know what it is in the world, but in this family, these are the things that we do. In the book, interesting family. Now, if you've read the Bible, I've read the Bible cover to cover. I miss this family so many times. And in Jeremiah, it's just a really small story about a family called the Rechabites. Anybody remember reading about the Rechabites? I went through the Bible so many times, and I skipped the story so many times. But the Rechabites were a family that for generations, a great-great-grandfather named Jehonadab. And Jehonadab said, hey, here's some core values I want to give you. Here's some things that we are going to do as a family. And he handed them down from generation to generation to generation, and they all followed this for years and years. Well, one day, Jeremiah was a prophet, and he invited the Rechabites, the leaders of the Rechabite family. He said, hey, come into the temple, something with you. I got a word from God for you. It's going to be amazing. You're going to love it. And he set before them all pitchers of wine. And he said, before I give it to you, let's have a drink. Let's celebrate what God has done. And look what happens. This is what the Rechabite family said to him. They basically looked at each other and then looked back at Jeremiah. And this is what they said. They said, we don't drink wine because our forefather Jehonadab gave us this command. Neither you nor your descendants must ever drink wine. Also, you must never build houses, sow seeds, or plant vineyards. You must also never have any of these things, but must always live in tents. Then you'll live a long time in the land where you're nomads. In other words, he said, this is the values. Their great-great-grandfather said, you're not going to live in a tent, and we're not going to drink wine, and these are the things that we're going to do. And they passed it along for generation to generation. Well, look what he says. He says in verse 8, we've obeyed everything our forefather Jehonadab, son of Rechab, commanded us. Neither we nor our wives nor our sons and our daughters have ever drunk wine or built houses to live in or had vineyards or crops or fields. We have lived. We obeyed everything our forefather Jehonadab commanded us. Now watch this. He said, but when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, invaded this land, we said, come, we must go to Jerusalem to escape the Babylonian and Aramean armies, so we have remained in Jerusalem. So basically, here's what happens, okay? You've got this great-great-grandfather that poured into him and said, the core values that this family is going to stand for. And over the generations, culture shifted. And things that were considered good became evil. Things that were evil became good. And they said, hey, that doesn't matter because we've got these core things that we stand for. And as a result, when this evil king came in and started laying waste to all the Israelites, stood for. They knew where they were rooted. And so they were able, because part of the core value was like, don't build a house. So they just picked up their stuff and moved on. I'm not saying this is going to be your core values. I hope you don't live in a tent somewhere. But I am saying this, like, what is the core value for you? Because for this family, it changed everything. And when the prophet, I'm so glad that that's what you had to say. Because whether you knew it or not, this was a test. I put that wine in front of you because one of the things that was a core value is they wouldn't drink wine. He said, I wanted to see if you were going to do that. Because if you did, you were going to be just like the Israelites. See, the Israelites were just allowing culture to invade them. And what was popular in the world started to become popular, worshiping everything. But this family, Jeremiah said, man, I'm so glad that you chose that direction. Because it shows me that you were willing to do what your great-great-grandfather had done. And they had followed after those core principles for so long. And so then the prophet said, you know what, as a result, God wants to bless you for it. And God does. He blesses them. And when my kids were very, very young, we had a decision to make. Deborah and I decided, like, how are we going to raise these kids? Like, I remember reading that story, and I told Deborah, I said, that's the blessing I want. I want the blessing for not just for my generation, but for generations after mine to be blessed as a result of what we're choosing right now. Looked like maybe you came out of a family that was dysfunctional and broken and came from all these different places, but I have all kinds of history in my past too, and my generations that came from before me, but I just decided, hey, for me and for my family, we're making a line in the sand. We're going to do something differently. And so Deborah and I decided we were going to spend some time. We actually took vacation. And we went off. We got away from work and we prayed into it, and we said, God, what are the things that are going to define our family? And so we came up with a vision. And I want to share with you our vision, and just because it's mine, and I think it's beautiful, but I believe this is what God gave us for our family. Now, your vision for your families might not look the exact same for us. It might be completely different, but for us, there are three things that we landed on. This kind of summarizes what we as a family do. We love God, we stick together, and we never give up. Those were important for us. We said that might sound like overly simplistic to you, but for us, that was exactly what we needed, because this is what everything comes out of that. Anything happens, we have this to fall back on. And over the years, we decided that this was going to be what Watsons do. My wife and my kids, if you go find them after service, I'd love for you to do this. Like, hey, what are three things that Watsons do? They'll tell you, we love God, we stick together, never give up. Those are three things that are important to us that summarize everything that we do. And when my kids were little and they were tempted to another, I would use this and I would say, hey, are we sticking together right now? And that would recalibrate them. I watched a 9-year-old boy one time was going through something really challenging and really difficult saying, and I said, hey, Watsons never give up. That's what we do. And I watched his determination washed over his face, and he went to another place. He recognized that we never give up. Right now, if you go back there, you can find all of my kids. They're out there serving. My kids have no problem pitching in. They like coming to church most of the time. But most of the time they do. And here's the reason why. They love to see the church grow. They love to see the kingdom of God expand. And some of my kids are right there serving kids right now. They're teaching your kids. Some of my kids got up this morning. They were here and setting up early with the setup team. And here's the reason why. Because God loves you no matter what you do. If you don't do one thing for him, it doesn't make him love you any less. If you decide, I'm not going to serve God, God says, I still love you. For you. But when we serve, it's our way of saying, God, we love you too. And it's our way that we can pour back on our God. And we love God. We stick together and we never give up. And that is the vision for our family. And so for our family, I had to know, where are we going? See, here's the thing that I know. Every family's going somewhere. Know where they're going. But they're going to end up there somewhere. Very few families are going there on purpose. They actually have a decision that I know where we're going, and I'm able to put wheels to this thing. And see, it just boils down to this. It doesn't have to be 3 things. Maybe it's just one thing. I don't know what it is for your family, but it boils down to where you're headed. Do you know, as a couple, a married couple, as a family, where we're going? See, my vision directs my prayers. And here's the funny thing is, when you have one of these, like when you have a vision for your family, your kids will call you out on it too. That was rough. There's been some times where my kids, I was working too much or too hard in a season, and a little, hey, Dad, I don't think we're sticking together real hard right now. And I've had to recalibrate and I had to say, man, you're right, I'm sorry. I apologize about that. And it changed the way that I moved and the thoughts that I was making for my family. And so I challenge you to have a vision. Come up with a vision for your marriage. Come up with a vision for your family. And here's the second thing you do. Second ingredients when you come to build trust with your family. You got to build trust inside your family. Trust is earned in teaspoons. It's lost in buckets. And trust is so important. We live in a culture that understands unconditional love, but we really don't understand unconditional respect. Let me ask you this question. Is it okay in your household to tear each other down with words? Are siblings able in your household to make fun of each other and rip each other apart? Is that all right? See, this was really challenging for me because sarcasm is my love language. I always think, God, if you didn't want me to be good, it's then sarcastic. Why'd you make me so good at it? Like, why? It doesn't make any sense. But that God is trying to get through to us. Is that all right? See, your home should be a refuge from the world and a springboard out into the world. And if your kids or your family are tearing each other down, then that means they have no refuge to come back to. Here's a question that my kids have heard so many times, they're probably sick of it. I say this, treat each other better than you would your best friend. Are you willing to treat your wife or your husband? Are you willing to treat your sibling better than you would your best friend? Because if not, then there is no refuge in your home. Now, how many times, here, let me ask you this. What would the punishment be if you had a kid and kid was in the process of setting your house on fire? And you caught him. It was the 3rd attempt. What would the punishment be, right? They're in the living room sloshing gas around, lighting matches, what would you be like, oh my gosh, what are you doing, right? And now if you lost your whole house in a fire and you were out, all your material possessions, but how much worse would it be to lose your family? And how many times do we tear each other down and burn each other up with our words? And how much more dangerous is that? See, if you want to build trust in your household, you got to ask this question. Does my spouse trust me? Worthy. Have I said that we're going to do some things that we never did? My kids have called me on that before. Dad, you said we were going to do that. And I've had to say, you know what? I'm sorry. I apologize for that. Or there have been times where I've disciplined in anger. Oh, come on, don't look at me like in that tone of voice. You're not that holy. You've done it too, right? You blow up. Here's the thing. When I was younger, I used to think if I said I'm sorry or I apologize, that'll show weakness. And I can't do that. Man, I'm outnumbered, They're coming after me. And I realized what happened is it's actually the opposite. When I actually humbled myself and said, hey, you know what? I yelled at you and I shouldn't have done that. I said we were supposed to. do it, and I didn't hold my end of the bargain. I apologize. Will you forgive me? And I'm telling you, I watched trust rebuild in my family's eyes as I came to them with this and said, hey, I made a mistake. And here, let me just tell you something, especially dads. Your spouse, your kids, they know it, whether or not you address it or not. They knew you, because we all blow it from time to time. They know you botched it. And when you come to your spouse or your kids and you say, hey, I made a mistake, will you forgive me? It actually starts to build trust inside of your family. Can I talk to ladies for a minute? I just want to talk to ladies in this house. Maybe you're single and you're looking for the person. I would say look at how that young man treats his mother. Now, I'm not saying that if he treats her really kind, that means he's going to be the most amazing husband. I'm saying that because some guys just listen to their mother because they're terrified of her. But like, I think it's a good indication. Like, it's a good indication of how they choose. Might be how they reflectively turn that back on you. And dads, let me tell you this. If you're a dad, you need to be spending quality time. You need to be pouring into the life of your daughter. Your daughter needs to hear you say, I think you're gorgeous. I think you're pretty. They need to hear that. This is why I tell my daughter this all. Why? Because some floppy-head little boy's going to come along sometime, and he's going to say, hey, baby girl, you're gorgeous. I think you're pretty. And I want my daughter to say, I know I'm pretty. My dad's been telling me that since I was an embryo, right? I don't want her to fall for that line. I don't, right? So we pour into our kids in this way. We encourage them. And here's the thing, like at some point, especially if you're a dad, I want you to hear this. Tell your daughter and your son how much you love them. I've had women tell me over the years, I know my dad loved me. He showed me 1,000 different ways. But I'd have given up 999 of those with his own mouth. I'm talking about it has an impact. Here's the last thing, I promise. We're wrapping up, buddy. Number 3, we need to commit to quality time in your family. Listen, God's not going to take up the slack for you in your relationship with him. Okay? If you choose to spend time with somebody other than God, it hurts you, it doesn't hurt your family. If you want to put something in front of your family, just recognize you're hurting your family. That's exactly what's happening. I think this is so important. Now, we went out to dinner, Deborah and I, one time, and we were sitting there and we were in a restaurant, and I looked over, beautiful family, a dad, a mom, and 4 or 5 little kids, and you know what? You know what they were all doing? This right here. They were all staring at their phones. And so you know what I did? I walked over to their table, I slapped it right out of their hand. No, that's what I wanted to do. And now here's the reason why, because I saw myself in them. I saw myself doing that same thing. I get so wrapped up in this little square box and into me. And I'm missing out on these most incredible people that God has put in my life that are staring me right in the face. And I'm just thinking, man, it's crazy what you decide to spend time on. We do this thing in my family, just absolutely drives me crazy. We decide we're going to eat together. We're going to spend some time as a family. We don't do it as much as at least sometimes during the week we sit together at the table and we eat. And we say this, no phones at the dinner table. That's our rule. And we look each other face to face. And here's what we do. And this drives me crazy because I could eat my entire plate in about 30 seconds. Like I could be done before anybody sits down. But we wait for Deborah to come and sit down with us. For it. And Deborah's like, and we're, and what are we always waiting on? We're always waiting on the bread. Why are we waiting? Why did we put the bread in the oven like an hour ago? I mean, like we wouldn't be waiting on it, right? And my boys are like sitting there ready like ravenous wolves. They're ready to eat too. And I said, no. And I said, Deb, we got to wait for you. And she's like, I'm sorry. Just go ahead and get started. No, because I think it's important for my kids to see that the woman that has been working on that meal, she deserves our respect. And we're going to wait on her. And when she sits down, then we can eat. And we look at each other face to face and we have conversation. And this is dangerous, especially like if you have little kids, because some little kids can talk for decades. I mean, like, you ever noticed, like, oh my gosh, are we on hour 3 of Minecraft? I mean, like, this is impressive. And when they're teenagers, it flips on you. You know what I mean? Like, they went from talking all the time. Teenagers have no problem spending all of their words on their friends, and they get home and they're mutes. You know, it's like, how was your day? Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. It's a normal day. Yeah. And so, like, I have to, like, pry it from them. And that's my problem. Hear this. Don't interrogate them. They don't want to be interrogated. I've tried. That's where I fail a lot of times. I interrogate them. Like, they'll tell me, like, it's got the light on and everything. And I'm like, wait, don't do that. Here's what you can do. Find out the thing that interests them. more about them. Get into what's fascinating to them. Ask them about them. A few years ago, I heard this saying that just changed my life. It says, one day, you'll put your child down and it'll be the last time. Like you'll never pick them up again. And so maybe they're young right now. Whatever it is, just pick them up. Carry them. My oldest, almost 19 years old now. And he's getting heavy. No, like, I'm hanging in there. No, I'm saying, like, here's the thing. Like there came a point where I put him down and I never picked him back up again. And this is important. There's an old theologian that once said this. He said, the ironic tragedy is that life has to be lived forward, but only makes sense. The older I get, the older my kids get, the more I realize, like, man, I had a season of time. And here's the thing. Don't get wrapped up in that. Just embrace the season you're in. If they're teenagers, you haven't lost it. If they've moved out of your house, you haven't lost it. Get a vision for where you want to help them go, what you want to pour into their life. Spend time with them, because nobody gets to. Man, I wish I had just one more hour to spend at the office. Man, I wish I had one more time where I could get that thing that I love. No, you think back of the people that actually you love and you care for. And God has modeled this for us the whole time. Because here's the truth. Your family doesn't go by what, they go by what your schedule says. Your spouse doesn't go by what your heart says. It's what does your calendar say? This is what God did. God said this in Jeremiah. He said, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. What is he saying? He's saying, listen, I had plans for you. I had a vision for you today. Man, if you're a parent, man, have plans, have vision. Like God thought of you. He actually had thoughts about you. He cares about you. You say, well, I don't know about that. I go through some difficult times. God says, no, listen, he's right there. He cares for you. Jesus said this of the Father. He cares for flowers. He cares so much, even though burnt, he takes care of them. He takes care of ravens, even though they're a little more than flying rats. I mean, like, he says, listen, I care about those things, and I care for you. He's a good father, and he's with you when it's agonizing and you're crying out in agony, or when it's a laughter moment. God is right there. No matter where you turn around, I'm right here. And maybe you're here today and you hear me talking about relationships and you're like, I don't even know if I can have a healthy relationship because I don't really even know if I'm a son or a daughter. Like I've never really accepted the sacrifice that Jesus made for me and poured out my life to him. Let me just tell you something. We've all blown it. I'm not telling you that to condemn you. I'm saying every one of us has sinned. That's what the book of Romans says. Every one of us falls short. And really, honestly, I can't have a good relationship with my kids, my wife. I can't have a good relationship with friends until I recognize that I'm a son first. That you're a son or a daughter first. That God, Father, saw you separated from him. And he said, I can't bear to live with that. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure we're together again. And so he paid the ultimate price. I mean, he gave his one and only son to die for us. I'm not talking about religion here. I'm not trying to talk about church membership. About having a relationship with your Father that loves you. And don't expect to try and make any relationship work right until you get this one right. Until you're vertically aligned. See, listen, sometimes people think like, oh man, I need more depth. I'm in deepness. I want to go deep in the Word. I'm saying like start here. What's your relationship like with him? What do you know God? Have you given up all of that junk and run towards him? Opened up your arms and say, Father, forgive me. I screwed up this week. Would you just pour into me so that I could pour into others? I'm telling you, I'm right here. I paid the death penalty for you. I lived a perfect life. And I died the death that you should have so that we could be together. Before you try to make it right in any relationship, you got to have this one right.